A reflection for the fourth Sunday after Easter. Praised be Jesus Christ, now and forever. From the lesson today, from James chapter 1, verse 19. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Many of you will have heard and perhaps have used with children the expression that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Perhaps the message is that we should listen twice as hard or twice as much as we talk. St Thomas Aquinas takes it a little bit further. Referring to today's epistle of St. James, he points out that God gave many animals the faculty of hearing, but not the faculty of speech. One of the parishioners I visit has a parrot. The parrot's called Coco. I know another priest who has visited this parishioner who doesn't really get on with Coco because she imitates his cough. So I've called the parrot Coughing Coco, obviously. In fact, when she speaks, she seems to have in mind a range of drinks: tea, coffee, juice, and chocolate. I don't know what it says about the diet of my parishioner. I did try something when I visited her last. I tried Christ is risen. No effect. Repeated it, Christ is risen. No, perhaps I should have tried it in Greek. Overall, Aquinas is right to say that speech is reserved for the rational animal man. With that directness of his logic, he says that if speech is reserved for the rational animal, then speech ought to be rational. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer every man. Colossians chapter 4, verse 6. That's good general advice. And St. Paul, in fact, is more specific. He asked his readers to pray for them that God would open unto us a door of utterance to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in bonds. Our mouths offer rational speech, but also for speech about the mysteries of God. Last time I bought plane tickets was over 2 years ago. I didn't use them because COVID was already beginning to cause problems. As I've been thinking about going abroad again, I've been strangely constrained in my motivation. I just didn't want to get embroiled in all of that draconian bureaucracy again. Well, I've eventually taken the plunge and bought some tickets. Italy, my destination, has dropped location forms, and that really persuaded me. Amongst other things, however, I don't want to be reminded about those masks. I'm going to have to take some just in case, of the right variety and certificated, but I'm hoping that they can stay in the luggage. They're unnatural. They're a barrier to human interaction. We can't hear half of what people say through them. Goodness knows what the deaf do when they can't read lips. But you know, perhaps masks have their uses. Go back to Aquinas again. He says, nature gave the instruments of hearing ever open, but the instruments of speech she closed by two barriers or protection. For man has his ears ever open, but his tongue closed in by his lips and teeth. And he goes on, the tongue is like an evil monarch, and therefore God enclosed it with many barriers. There's a thought. Our ears are ever open, but our tongues are protected behind our teeth and our lips. Well, I wonder whether masks have formed the third barrier. Perhaps they ought to have made us more economical with words. I doubt it. Proverbs 10:19 is relevant here. When words are many, transgressions are not lacking. What a pity we don't use the barriers God and the government have provided. Do you remember a couple of decades ago when mobile phones were new and they began to proliferate? There was a marked phenomenon on the underground line I used for sure. In the rush hour coming home, as soon as the train came out of the tunnel on the track, there was a general grasping for phones in pockets and handbags and the like. And the conversations were rather predictable. A little bit of small talk, how's the day gone for you, etc., before the real reason of the call. I'm 10 minutes away from the station. Would you mind picking me up? You could predict, you could almost chorus those phone calls. Well, that's gone. With the advent of texting, the cacophony of calls has gone. Silence reigns once again. There's just the tapping on the screen. Messaging. How many more people are going to destroy their lives and those of others around them by unguarded messages? It's a phenomenon which is so obvious in our media. Those messages that we send are recorded for posterity. Just think. Amongst the innocuous and the positive and the downright funny, just think, there are oodles of digital poison, evil motivations for messages, snide comments, harsh jokes, maybe even parting of the ways. We've all heard of people who have been sacked by at least email, if not text. Somewhere they are all recorded. But it's actually far worse. If we heap on top of all of that, all that we have ever uttered, which we thought died on our breath, then we begin to get the idea of what the day of judgment is going to be like. Whoso keepeth his mouth and his tongue keepeth his soul from troubles, we read in Proverbs. We might add his digits. Who keepeth his mouth and his tongue and his digits, then they keep him from troubles. Even in our day, we can always sense a good listener. They may even be one of those people who stoop down or even kneel down to talk to the little child, perhaps wiping away a tear. They are listening. Or they are listening bent over the wheelchair to the words of someone who can barely speak. They're giving respect respect to the other person. Hear in silence, and for thy reverence good grace shall come to thee. For thy reverence good grace shall come to thee. Sirach 32:9. Yes. In the Gospel today we read of the Spirit. For he shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever things he shall hear he shall speak, and the things that are to come he shall show you. There we have it. Even the Holy Spirit can hear in silence. He has received from the Father and the Son what he passes on. And when he speaks, then we should listen. If we are silent, perhaps God can speak through us too. Praise be Jesus Christ, now and forever.